The transporter beam dissolved into chaos. One moment, Captain James T. Kirk stood on the platform of a classified Starfleet research station, preparing for what should have been a routine departure. The next, reality fractured. Colors bleeding into impossible spectrums, time stretching like taffy, his molecules screaming through dimensions that had no name. He'd experienced hundreds of transports, survived dozens of malfunctions. But this felt fundamentally wrong. The sensation of being scattered across subspace itself, touching something vast and temporal before reality snapped back with violent certainty. Kirk materialized mid-fall, combat instincts taking over before conscious thought. He tucked, rolled, came up in a defensive crouch, and immediately registered he wasn't where he should be. Not a research station. Some kind of cargo bay, industrial, the lighting harsh and unfamiliar. The air tasted recycled, sterile, and filled with weapons fire. Orange energy bolts scorched past his head. Kirk dove behind a cargo container, hand instinctively reaching for his phaser. Still there. Old model, but functional. He risked a glance around the container's edge. Tactical assessment automatic. 8 hostiles, mixed species, in civilian clothes, but moving with military precision. They were firing at Starfleet security personnel pinned down behind makeshift cover near what looked like computer terminals. Not phasers. Some kind of modified Type 3 rifles he didn't recognize. The Starfleet officers were returning fire, but defensively, trying not to hit the attackers. "Stand down," one of the security officers shouted. "You're under arrest for terrorism against the Federation." Terrorism? Against the Federation? Kirk's mind reeled, even as his body stayed mission-focused. The architecture was wrong. Too clean, too advanced. The Starfleet uniforms were wrong. Some kind of two-piece design with colored shoulders he'd never seen. Even the phasers looked different, sleeker. And those security officers weren't trying to kill the hostiles. They were pulling their punches while being shot at. One of the civilians, a human woman, maybe 40, with a hard face and a scar along her jawline, spotted Kirk. Her rifle swung toward him. "Starfleet," she snarled. "Another lapdog for the Cardassians." Cardassians? Kirk's confusion spiked, but he didn't have time to process. The woman fired. Kirk rolled, came up, and stunned her with a quick phaser shot. She dropped. 2 of her companions wheeled on him, and Kirk realized with cold clarity that he just entered someone else's battle with no idea which side was which. Only the people were calling Starfleet terrorists and accusing them of serving someone called Cardassians. "Cease fire." Kirk's command voice cut through the chaos, honed by years of bridge authority. "Everyone stand down now." For a moment, just a moment, both sides hesitated. Kirk used it. He rose to full height, phaser visible but lowered, projecting command presence like a physical force. "I'm Captain James T. Kirk, USS Enterprise. Someone want to tell me what the hell is going on?" One of the Starfleet security officers, a young Bajoran man with a nose ridge and a lieutenant's pip, stared at Kirk like he'd seen a ghost. "Captain Kirk, that's impossible. You've been dead for 78 years. The words hit Kirk like a physical blow. Dead. 78 years. That transporter malfunction hadn't just scattered his molecules, it had thrown him through time. The remaining civilians used the distraction. They grabbed their stunned companion and bolted for a side corridor, one of them triggering some kind of device. A shimmer of energy. A portable shield generator blocked the Starfleet officer's return fire. Within seconds, they'd vanished into the station's depths. "Damn it!" The Bajoran lieutenant slapped his comm badge, another unfamiliar technology. Lieutenant Karen to Ops. The Maquis escaped with a computer core. Casualties: 3 wounded, 1 unidentified human claiming to be Captain James T. Kirk appeared during the firefight. Maquis? Kirk's mind cataloged the word even as another voice crackled back through that comm badge, thin and disembodied. Acknowledged, Lieutenant. Seal that section and bring the unidentified individual to Ops for questioning. Deep Space Nine out. Kirk's trained mind caught the essential details. Deep Space Nine, a station, not a ship. Maquis, whoever they were, Starfleet was fighting them. And he'd just been transported 78 years into his own future. Into a federation where former comrades were shooting at Starfleet officers and stealing computer cores. The lieutenant approached cautiously. Phaser still drawn, but not aimed. Up close, Kirk could see the exhaustion in his eyes. The kind that came from fighting people you didn't want to fight. Sir, I'm going to need you to come with me. We'll sort out who you are and how you got here. Kirk holstered his phaser, a gesture of cooperation. But his security officers flanked him, professional, careful, treating him like a potential threat. He studied their faces. Young, uncertain, fighting an enemy they called terrorists, but treated with kid gloves. Something was very wrong in this future federation, and James T. Kirk had never been good at watching injustice unfold without acting. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. To boldly go where no one has gone before. As they escorted him through corridors that looked more Cardassian than Federation, wherever and whatever Cardassian was, Kirk's mind raced through possibilities. Temporal displacement, 78 years. The Maquis, a federation at war with its own people. He'd faced impossible situations before, talked his way past computers and gods. But this was uncharted territory, even for him. The corridor opened into a massive operations center, all curved Cardassian architecture and Federation technology grafted together like a hasty marriage. Officers worked at stations surrounding a central command platform where a bald human in a Starfleet uniform, Captains Pips, Kirk noted, stood with his arms crossed, watching a view screen showing the fleeing Maquis ships jumping to warp. The captain turned. His face was weathered, eyes holding the weight of command decisions Kirk recognized intimately. But there was something else there. A weariness, a compromise with reality that Kirk had never allowed himself. Captain Benjamin Sisko, the man said, voice measured. Welcome to Deep Space Nine, Captain Kirk. We have a lot to talk about. Kirk met his gaze steadily. Captain Sisko's ready room was smaller than Kirk expected, more utilitarian than the spacious quarters he'd known on the Enterprise. Through the viewport, Kirk could see stars that weren't quite where they should be. 78 years of stellar drift. The thought made him feel untethered, adrift in more than just space. Sisko sat behind his desk, fingers steepled, studying Kirk with the intensity of a man who'd learned not to take anything at face value. A Trill science officer, Dax, according to her uniform, stood nearby, tricorder humming as it scanned Kirk with technology that made his own instruments look like stone knives. Life signs consistent with human male, age approximately 35, Dax reported, her tone clinical but not unkind. Molecular pattern shows evidence of severe temporal displacement. And Benjamin, his quantum signature matches Starfleet records for Captain James T. Kirk, circa 2270. He's the genuine article. Kirk raised an eyebrow. Glad I passed the audition. Now someone want to explain why the Federation I died defending apparently turned into something I don't recognize? Sisko's jaw tightened. The Federation you knew still exists, Captain. But the galaxy's grown more complicated. Complicated. Kirk tasted the word like poison. I just watched Starfleet officers exchange fire with people they called terrorists. Those terrorists were human, Bajoran. Federation citizens, unless I miss my guess. And that woman called you lapdogs for the Cardassians. So let me be clear, Captain. I've dealt with complicated. Klingons trying to start wars, Romulans playing chess with star systems, computers that wanted to kill us for illogic. But I never had to hunt down my own people. You never had to make peace with an enemy that cost millions of lives, Sisko said quietly. The Cardassian War lasted 20 years. When it finally ended, both sides needed the bleeding to stop. Dax activated a display panel, showing a star chart Kirk didn't recognize. A buffer zone marked in red stretched between Federation and Cardassian space. Dozens of systems, hundreds of colonies. The demilitarized zone, she explained, part of the treaty that ended the war. Both sides agreed to evacuate colonies in the DMZ. Some Cardassian settlers refused, some Federation colonists refused. The governments decided the treaty was more important than forcing compliance. Kirk leaned forward, studying the map. You left Federation citizens under Cardassian rule. We didn't have a choice, Sisko said. But Kirk heard the doubt beneath the words. The alternative was continuing a war neither side could win. Millions more dead. The treaty brought peace. Peace. Kirk's voice carried an edge that had made admirals nervous. I've negotiated with Klingons, Captain. Held the line against the Romulans. But I never abandoned my own people to buy peace. Sisko stood, and Kirk saw the flash of anger. Good, honest anger that said this man wasn't entirely comfortable with his Federation's choices. You think I like it? You think any of us like it? Those colonists in the DMZ are human beings, Bajorans, Bolians, people who built lives on those worlds. But the Cardassians would have kept fighting. The Dominion was already making moves in the Gamma Quadrant. We had to choose between saving those colonists and saving the entire Federation. The needs of the many, Kirk said softly, outweigh the needs of the few. Isn't that what your Vulcan friend used to say? Kirk's expression hardened. Spock said that before sacrificing himself, not other people. There's a difference. The silence stretched between them. Two captains from different eras, different philosophies. Finally, Dax spoke, her voice gentle but firm. The colonists who stayed formed the Maquis. They're fighting a guerrilla war against the Cardassians and against Starfleet because we're enforcing the treaty. They see us as traitors. We see them as terrorists who'll restart the war. Kirk turned to the viewport, watching a runabout depart the station. What do you see them as, Captain Sisko? The question hung in the air. Sisko moved to stand beside Kirk, both men staring out at the stars. I see people who had everything taken from them and decided to fight back. I see former Starfleet officers who couldn't live with the compromise. And I see a threat to galactic peace that I'm sworn to stop. He paused. I see all of it, Captain. That's what command means in this century. Kirk absorbed that, recognizing the weight Sisko carried. This wasn't the relatively straightforward universe Kirk had navigated. Enemies were enemies, allies were allies, and you found creative solutions that saved everyone. This was murkier, more political, less forgiving of idealism. The woman who called you Cardassian lapdogs, Kirk said. She was human. Starfleet? Lieutenant Commander Sakana, Dax answered. Actually Vulcan, not human, one of the Maquis leaders. Former Starfleet tactical officer, she gave up her career, her future, everything to fight for the colonists. A Vulcan freedom fighter. Kirk filed that away. If Vulcan logic had concluded the Maquis cause was just, what did that say about the Federation's position? I want to see the DMZ. Sisko turned sharply. Captain, you're a temporal anomaly. Starfleet Command will want you debriefed, studied, probably sequestered until they figure out what to do with you. I didn't ask permission, Captain. I'm telling you what I need. Kirk's command voice was back, honed by years of making impossible decisions stick. You can assign me a handler, put me under guard, monitor everything I do. But I'm not sitting in a cell while people die over a treaty I don't understand. I've been in this uniform too long to start now. Sisko studied him for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition of a kindred spirit who couldn't stand aside when people needed help. You're 78 years out of date, Captain. No ship, no crew, no authority here. I've started with less, Kirk said simply. Dax smiled slightly. Benjamin, he reminds me of you. Stubborn, idealistic, terrible at following orders. That's not reassuring, old man. But Sisko was already moving toward his desk, pulling up personnel files. All right, Captain Kirk. I'll take you to the DMZ. But you're going as an observer only. No cowboy diplomacy. No Kirk solutions that violate the Prime Directive and start wars. You watch, you learn, and you keep your opinions to yourself unless I ask for them. Kirk nodded, knowing full well he was lying. If he saw injustice, he'd act. That's what captains did. And Captain? Sisko's voice carried warning. The Maquis know who you are. James T. Kirk is a legend. The captain who always found a way, who never left anyone behind. They'll try to recruit you. And if they succeed, I'll have to arrest you. Understood. Kirk met his gaze steadily. But answer me one question, Captain. If you were one of those colonists abandoned by the Federation you'd served, would you have joined the Maquis? Sisko didn't answer. He didn't have to. The conflict in his eyes said everything. The runabout Rio Grande dropped out of warp at the edge of the demilitarized zone. And Kirk got his first look at the Federation's compromise with his own eyes. The view screen showed Volan III, a Class M planet with sprawling agricultural settlements visible from orbit. It should have looked peaceful. Green continents, blue oceans, white clouds. Instead, Kirk saw Cardassian patrol ships in orbit, weapons platforms scattered across the upper atmosphere, and sensor nets that made the planet look like a cage. No, 200,000 colonists, Sisko said from the pilot's seat, his voice carefully neutral. Federation citizens who've lived here for 30 years. Under the treaty, they're technically Cardassian subjects now. Most adapted. Some joined the Maquis, some just try to survive. Kirk watched a Cardassian warship, a Galler-class cruiser. Dax had called it, drift past. Predatory lines, weapons arrays that could reduce a colony to ash. And Starfleet patrols to make sure the Maquis don't help them. We patrolled to prevent weapons smuggling and ensure treaty compliance, Sisko corrected. But Kirk heard the discomfort. The Cardassians have agreed not to mistreat the colonists. We monitor the situation. Monitor. Kirk's tone made it a curse. From orbit, while Cardassian soldiers walk those streets. Dax glanced back from the sensor station. Benjamin, I'm picking up elevated tensions on the surface. Looks like a Cardassian security sweep in the primary settlement, Victoria Colony, and damn, phaser signatures. The Maquis are hitting the Cardassian garrison. Sisko's jaw tightened. How many casualties? None yet. The Maquis are targeting weapons depots, trying to avoid killing. But the Cardassians are responding with full force. Kirk was already out of his seat, moving toward the transporter pad in the rear compartment. We need to get down there. People will die. Captain Kirk, sit down. Sisko's voice carried command authority. We can't interfere. The treaty specifically forbids Federation intervention in Cardassian internal security matters. Kirk turned, disbelief and anger warring on his face. Internal security. Those are Federation citizens being shot at by an occupying force. They're Cardassian subjects now, by treaty. Sisko stood, facing Kirk. I don't like it any more than you do. But if we beam down there and interfere, we violate the treaty. The Cardassians retaliate. The war starts again, and millions die. So we watch. Kirk's voice was quiet, dangerous. We sit up here in our comfortable Starfleet runabout and watch people who believed in the Federation get slaughtered because it's politically inconvenient to help them. We follow our orders, Captain. That's what Starfleet officers do. Kirk moved closer, and Sisko saw the legendary temper that had gotten Kirk into trouble with admirals throughout his career. I've disobeyed orders to save lives, violated the Prime Directive when my conscience demanded it, started wars and ended them because it was the right thing to do. Don't lecture me about following orders, Captain. Not when people are dying. Benjamin, Dax interrupted, her voice tight. The Cardassians just executed 12 Maquis fighters. Public execution in the colony square. They're broadcasting it as a warning. The cabin fell silent. Kirk saw Sisko's fists clench. Saw the muscle jump in his jaw. Good. This man wasn't a politician yet. He was still a Starfleet captain who bled when his people hurt. How many Cardassian casualties? Sisko asked finally. 3 wounded, none killed. The Maquis were targeting infrastructure, not people. Kirk turned back to the view screen, watching the Cardassian warship. 12 people executed for fighting an occupation. 12 people who'd probably been colonists, farmers, teachers, ordinary citizens pushed to violence by impossible circumstances. And Starfleet sat in orbit, watching, because a treaty said their lives didn't matter anymore. Take us down, Kirk said quietly. Captain, I said take us down, or I'll steal this runabout and do it myself. Kirk's eyes never left the view screen. I've transported into hostile situations before, Captain Sisko. With less information and worse odds. Those people down there need to know the Federation hasn't completely abandoned them. If we land, the Cardassians will file a diplomatic protest. Starfleet Command will have my head. Kirk finally turned, and Sisko saw something in those eyes that made him understand why this man was legendary. An absolute conviction that some principles mattered more than politics. Then they'll have to get in line behind everyone else who's wanted my head over the years. I've been court-martialed, Captain. I've been relieved of command. I've broken every regulation in the book when lives were at stake, and I'd do it all again. Dax looked between them and then spoke quietly. Benjamin, Starfleet regulations do permit humanitarian assistance in cases of natural disaster or medical emergency. Executing prisoners might qualify as a humanitarian crisis. It was a thin excuse, and everyone in the cabin knew it. But Sisko studied Kirk for a long moment. This relic from a simpler time, a captain who still believed in absolutes, and made his decision. We're going down as observers only. Humanitarian assessment. We do not engage with Cardassian forces. We do not assist the Maquis. We observe, we report, and we leave. Are we clear, Captain Kirk? Crystal. Kirk was already moving back to his seat. The Rio Grande dropped through the atmosphere, heat shields glowing. Kirk watched the colony grow larger on the view screen. Neat rows of buildings, agricultural fields, a central square where a crowd had gathered. And in that square, Cardassian soldiers in gray armor, weapons at the ready, standing over 12 bodies. The runabout settled on a landing pad at the colony's edge. Sisko was on his feet immediately, his face set in grim lines. Dax, you're with me. Captain Kirk, you stay 3 steps behind us and let me do the talking. The moment you see Maquis, you pretend you don't know them. Understood? Kirk nodded, but Dax caught the look in his eyes. The look of a man who'd just seen something that offended every principle he'd spent his life defending. And she knew, with the certainty of 8 lifetimes, that James T. Kirk was going to do something about it. Whether Starfleet regulations permitted it or not. The air on Volan III tasted like defeat. Kirk stepped off the runabout into afternoon heat and the smell of smoke from burning buildings. The colony's main square stretched before them. 50 meters of compacted dirt surrounded by prefabricated structures that had seen better decades. And in the center, 12 bodies lay where they'd fallen, uncovered, unmourned, left as a warning. Cardassian soldiers lined the square's perimeter, gray armor gleaming, disruptor rifles held at ready. Kirk counted 20 visible, probably more in surrounding buildings. A Cardassian officer, a ghoul, based on the ornate armor and the arrogant bearing, stood on a raised platform addressing the colonists forced to watch. "Let this serve as reminder," the ghoul announced, his voice amplified by a portable speaker system. "The Cardassian Union will not tolerate terrorism. Any colonist found harboring Maquis insurgents will be executed. Any colonist found providing supplies to the Maquis will be executed. Any colonist found..." "Ghoul Evek." Sisko's voice cut across the square, command authority brooking no argument. He walked forward, Kirk and Dax flanking him, moving with the deliberate confidence of Starfleet officers who refused to be intimidated. "I'm Captain Benjamin Sisko, Deep Space Nine. We're here to assess humanitarian conditions as permitted under Treaty Article 7. The ghoul turned, and Kirk got his first close look at a Cardassian. Reptilian features, prominent neck ridges, eyes that held cunning and cruelty in equal measure. The ghoul smiled, and it was not reassuring. "Captain Sisko, how convenient that Starfleet arrives after we've dealt with the terrorist threat." Evek descended from the platform with measured steps. "As you can see, humanitarian conditions are excellent. The insurgents who threatened colony stability have been neutralized. Order is restored." Kirk's hands clenched into fists, but he kept his mouth shut. For now. Sisko's expression remained neutral, professional. "Gulevek, those are Federation citizens." "We're Federation citizens. The treaty transferred sovereignty. They are Cardassian subjects who engaged in armed rebellion against legitimate authority. We exercised appropriate force." "They were farmers," a voice called from the crowd of colonists. An older woman, her face weathered by sun and grief, stepped forward despite a Cardassian soldier moving to intercept. "My son was a teacher before you came. He grew vegetables and taught children algebra. You turned him into a terrorist by burning his home and killing his students." The soldier grabbed her arm roughly, but the woman didn't flinch. Kirk saw defiance in her eyes, the same defiance he'd seen in resistance fighters on a dozen occupied worlds. The same defiance that built the Federation in the first place. "That's enough, Mrs. Chen." A new voice, male, carefully controlled. A human man in his 40s emerged from a colonial administration building, wearing civilian clothes but moving with military bearing. Gul Evek, Captain Sisko. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. Administrator Mayhew. Evek acknowledged with mocking courtesy. Yes. Let us remove the unpleasant realities from public view. They moved toward the administration building, Cardassian guards maintaining careful distance. Kirk glanced back at the square, at Mrs. Chen being pulled away by other colonists, at the 12 bodies still lying in the sun, at the fear and anger on every face. This wasn't occupation. This was oppression, and the Federation had sanctioned it. Inside the building, the temperature dropped. Mayhew closed the door, and his professional mask cracked slightly. Captain Sisko, thank God. I've been filing reports for 3 months. Avek's security measures are getting worse. He's arresting people for looking at him wrong. The executions today, those people were caught with farming equipment the Cardassians decided could be weapons. Farming equipment that was being used to construct explosives. Evek corrected smoothly. We have evidence. You have allegations and a desire to terrorize the population into submission. Mayhew shot back, some courage returning. This isn't security. It's punishment. Evek's smile widened. You colonists remain here by our mercy, Administrator. The treaty gives us sovereignty. How we maintain order is our concern. Kirk couldn't stay silent anymore. Sovereignty comes with responsibility. You're not maintaining order. You're creating the very resistance you claim to oppose. Evek's eyes shifted to Kirk for the first time, studying him with predatory interest. And you are? Captain James T. Kirk. The name clearly registered. Evek's expression shifted to something like amusement. The legendary Kirk. I've read the histories. The cowboy captain who destroyed computers, seduced his way across the galaxy, and started wars through sheer arrogance. How appropriate that Starfleet sends a relic from their more aggressive past to witness their current impotence. Kirk took a step forward before Sisko's hand caught his shoulder. Easy, Captain. Listen to your superior, Kirk. Evek purred. This is not your century. The Federation you knew, bold, idealistic, willing to fight for principle, died long ago. Now they negotiate, they compromise. They abandon their own people to buy peace with us. You are a ghost, Captain. A reminder of what Starfleet used to be before they learned to kneel. Benjamin? Dax said quietly, her tricorder humming. I'm detecting weapons signatures in the hills north of here. Multiple phaser rifles, Federation origin. The Maquis are watching this colony. Evek's smile became triumphant. Of course they are. They always watch. And when they attack, and they will attack, Captain Sisko, we will respond with appropriate force. More colonists will die. More executions will be necessary. And you will file another report that changes nothing. Mayhew looked at Sisko with desperate hope. Captain, you can stop this. You have authority. I have treaty obligations, Sisko said, and Kirk heard the self-loathing beneath the words. The Federation Council has been clear. We cannot interfere in Cardassian internal affairs. Then what good is the Federation? Mrs. Chen stood in the doorway, having followed them. Tears streaked her face, but her voice was steady. We believed in you. We built these colonies under your flag, and when the Cardassians came, you traded us away like cargo. My son died believing Starfleet would remember us. He died wrong. The silence that followed was absolute. Kirk looked at Sisko and saw a good man trapped by impossible circumstances. He looked at Evek and saw a bully drunk on sanctioned power. He looked at Mayhew and the colonists and saw people who'd been abandoned by the institution they'd trusted most. And he made a decision that would change everything. "Mrs. Chen," Kirk said quietly, "I'd like to speak with you about your son, about the Maquis." He looked directly at Sisko. "Privately?" Sisko's eyes widened in alarm. "Captain Kirk, don't..." "I'm not under your command, Captain Sisko, and I'm not bound by your treaties." Kirk's voice was gentle but implacable. "I'm a man who's been given a chance to see what my Federation became, and I don't like what I see." "If you contact the Maquis," Sisko said urgently, "you become a criminal. Starfleet will hunt you. Won't be the first time." Kirk turned to Mrs. Chen. "Ma'am, will you take me to the people who knew your son?" She studied him for a long moment. This legend from the past, this captain who represented everything the Federation used to stand for, and nodded slowly. "Yes, Captain Kirk. I think they'd very much like to meet you." As they walked toward the door, Evik laughed softly. How delightful. The legendary Kirk about to join terrorists. This will make an excellent report for Central Command. Kirk paused at the doorway, looking back at the Cardassian. "I've faced Klingons, Romulans, and godlike beings, Gulevek. I've been tortured, court-martialed, and left for dead. And I've never, in all my years, seen anything as cowardly as executing farmers and calling it security." "Benjamin," Dax whispered urgently, "if he makes contact with the Maquis, we'll have to report it." Sisko watched Kirk disappear into the colony streets, feeling the weight of command settle even heavier on his shoulders. "I know, old man, I know." Outside, in the gathering dusk, Mrs. Chen led Kirk through narrow streets toward the colony's edge. "They'll be watching, Captain. The Maquis. They've heard you're here. Every colonist in the DMZ knows the name James T. Kirk." "What will they want from me?" Kirk asked. "The same thing we all want, Captain." Her voice carried weight of loss and desperate hope. "They'll want you to be the hero from the stories. The captain who never abandoned his crew, who always found a way." Kirk looked back at the square, where Cardassian soldiers still stood guard over 12 bodies. "Then I hope I don't disappoint them." In the hills above the colony, through a sniper scope, a Vulcan woman watched the legendary captain walk toward the Resistance. And for the first time in months, she allowed herself something approaching hope. The meeting happened in a cave system 5 kilometers from Victoria Colony. Natural tunnels carved by ancient rivers, now serving as a Maquis safe house. Kirk descended rough-hewn steps cut into stone, following Mrs. Chen and 2 armed escorts who'd appeared from the darkness like ghosts. Young faces, old eyes. The kind of transformation war inflicted on people who'd never wanted to be soldiers. The main chamber opened into a natural amphitheater lit by portable generators. 30 people, maybe 40, gathered in small groups, checking weapons, reviewing tactical displays, eating rations. All of them stopped when Kirk entered. The whispers started immediately. "That's really him? Kirk, James T. Kirk, the Enterprise captain." A woman stepped forward from the group. The Vulcan Kirk had stunned on Deep Space Nine. Up close, without weapons fire between them, Kirk could see the control in her posture, the logical assessment in her dark eyes. But beneath the Vulcan composure, something burned. "Captain Kirk, I am Sakana, former Lieutenant Commander, Starfleet Tactical. I apologize for attempting to kill you during our first encounter. It was not logical. You were an unknown variable, not a confirmed threat." Kirk accepted her hand in the Vulcan salute, muscle memory from decades serving with Spock. I've been shot at for worse reasons, Commander. No apology necessary. A human man pushed through the crowd. Weathered face, commander's bearing, maybe 50, but looking 70. Cal Hudson. I was Starfleet security stationed on Dorvan 5 when the treaty was signed. Lost my home, my career, everything I believed in. His voice carried bitterness, aged into determination. You're either the bravest man in the galaxy or the stupidest, Captain Kirk. Coming here means Starfleet will brand you a terrorist. I've been called worse. Kirk looked around the chamber, taking in the faces, young and old, human and alien, former Starfleet and civilian alike, united by betrayal. I came because I needed to understand. The Federation I knew didn't abandon its citizens. The Federation you knew died, Hudson said flatly. What's left is politicians trading lives for peace accords. We're the acceptable losses. Mrs. Chen moved to a tactical display showing the DMZ. Dozens of colonies, hundreds of settlements, millions of lives caught in the buffer zone. The Cardassians promised to respect our rights under the treaty. They lied. Curfews, arbitrary arrests, executions for suspicious activity. We petitioned the Federation Council, filed formal complaints, begged Starfleet to intervene. She looked at Kirk with eyes that had seen too much. They sent us sympathy and advised us to adapt to Cardassian rule. So you formed the Maquis, Kirk said. Not a question. We fight, Sakana corrected. Vulcan precision applied to guerrilla warfare. Logical assessment. The Cardassians respond only to force. Diplomatic protest achieves nothing. Armed resistance creates pressure. Therefore, armed resistance is the logical course. Kirk studied the Vulcan woman. Spock, my first officer, would have argued that logic without compassion leads to fascism. And I would argue that compassion without action leads to complicity. Sakana's eyes met his steadily. I spent 30 years in Starfleet learning Federation ideals. The Maquis are those ideals in practice. Infinite diversity, self-determination, protection of the innocent. We are what the Federation should be. A tactical alert chimed. A young Bajoran woman at the sensor station called out, Commander Hudson, Cardassian patrol approaching Victoria Colony. Heavy weapons. They're going for the school. The chamber exploded into motion. Weapons grabbed, teams forming up with practiced efficiency. Hudson was already issuing orders. Third Squad, intercept pattern Delta. Sakana, take sniper position on the ridge. Non-lethal if possible, but protect those civilians. Wait. Kirk's command voice cut through the chaos. What's at the school? 40 children, Mrs. Chen said quietly. The Cardassians think we're hiding weapons there. We're not. It's just a school. But Evek doesn't care about truth. Kirk's jaw tightened. Children. Always the innocents paid first. How many Cardassian soldiers? 20, maybe 25. The Bajoran sensor operator reported. Standard garrison patrol. They'll storm the building, tear it apart, terrorize the kids to send a message. Hudson checked his phaser rifle. We hit them before they reach the school. Fast, surgical, then fade back into the hills before reinforcements arrive. You'll start a firefight 50 meters from children, Kirk said. Stray shots, ricochets. Someone will get hurt. You have a better idea, Captain? Hudson's tone carried challenge. Because sitting here while the Cardassians brutalize kids isn't an option. Kirk's mind raced through tactical scenarios. Decades of combat experience colliding with the immediate crisis. The old Kirk solution, beam down, talk your way through it, improvise brilliantly, save everyone. But he had no ship, no crew, no transporter, just a cave full of desperate people and his own conviction that there had to be another way. "I'll go," Kirk said. "Alone. Negotiate with him." The chamber fell silent. Hudson stared at him like he'd suggested surrendering to the Borg. "Negotiate. Kirk, these aren't Klingons with a code of honor. Cardassians respect only strength and cunning. They'll arrest you or shoot you." "Maybe." Kirk moved toward the cave entrance. "But I'm not Maquis. I'm not a colonist. I'm Captain James T. Kirk, and even in this century, that name apparently still means something. Evek knew who I was. He'll want to talk before he shoots, if only to gloat." Sakana raised an eyebrow. "Highly illogical. You risk your life for colonists you met hours ago." "Risk is our business, Commander. Or it used to be." Kirk looked at Hudson. "Your people are farmers and teachers playing soldier because they have no choice. I've been a soldier my entire life. Let me do what I'm trained for." Mrs. Chen touched his arm. "Captain, those are good people down there. That school, my grandson's in that school. If you're doing this to be a hero." "I'm doing this because it's right." Kirk's voice softened. "And because I'm tired of watching good people die while I follow regulations." Hudson studied him for a long moment, then made a decision that would later haunt him. "Fine. But we shadow you. First sign the Cardassians open fire. We hit them from 3 sides. You get 1 chance to talk your way out, Kirk. After that, we do this the Maquis way." Kirk nodded and headed for the cave entrance. Behind him, Sakana spoke quietly. "Commander Hudson, this is a 43% chance of success." "Better than most of our operations," Hudson replied, signaling his teams to move out. "And if it fails, at least we'll go down fighting with James Kirk. It's got to be worth something." The trek to Victoria Colony took 20 minutes through rough terrain. Kirk moved with the Maquis fighters, impressed despite himself by their discipline and training. These weren't terrorists. They were soldiers fighting for their homes. The Federation had created its own enemy by abandoning these people. They crested a ridge overlooking the colony as the Cardassian patrol reached the school. A simple prefab structure, playground equipment visible in the yard. Through the windows, Kirk could see children's drawings taped to walls. Normal lives, interrupted by politics and war. The Cardassian commander, a Glynn by his armor markings, barked orders. Soldiers fanned out, disruptors drawn. Parents emerged from nearby buildings, desperate, trying to interpose themselves between the soldiers and the school. The Glynn shoved one man aside roughly. Kirk started down the slope before anyone could stop him, walking with deliberate confidence toward the confrontation. Hudson's voice crackled in his borrowed comm badge. "Kirk, what the hell are you doing?" "Negotiating," Kirk replied, and kept walking. The Cardassian soldiers saw him coming, a lone figure in an antique Starfleet uniform, unarmed, approaching like he owned the planet. The Glynn's disruptor swung toward him. "Halt! Identify yourself." Kirk stopped 10 meters away, hands visible and empty. "Captain James T. Kirk, Starfleet. I'm here to discuss your search of that school." The Glynn's eyes narrowed. "You are the one Gul Evek mentioned. The relic. You have no authority here, Kirk. This is Cardassian territory." "Then let's talk as one military professional to another." Kirk gestured toward the school. "You're looking for weapons, I understand. But that's a school full of children who've done nothing wrong. Search it if you must, but let me go in first. I'll verify there are no weapons, no Maquis, nothing that threatens Cardassian security." You get your intelligence without terrorizing kids. Why would I trust you? The Glynn's finger remained on his weapon's trigger. You associate with colonists. You are probably Maquis yourself. I'm a Starfleet captain who stood between civilians and danger for 30 years. My word is... Kirk paused, finding the right phrase. A matter of honor. Search me if you want. I'm unarmed. But let me keep those children calm while you conduct your operation. The Glynn studied him. Calculation visible. Kirk recognized the type. A soldier following orders, not a sadist like Evek. Someone who might listen to reason if it served his mission. Gulevek wants to interrogate you, the Glynn said finally. If I bring you in alive, he will be pleased. Then you have leverage, Kirk said calmly, though his heart hammered. I'll submit to questioning after you search the school, peacefully, no resistance, but the children stay safe. A long silence. Wind rustled through the colony streets. Parents watched with desperate hope. On the ridge, the Maquis had the Cardassian patrol in their sights. The Glynn made his decision. You will accompany my soldiers into the building. You will remain visible at all times. Any sign of deception, any Maquis interference, and we execute everyone in that school. Understood? Understood. Kirk started toward the school entrance, feeling the weight of 40 young lives settling on his shoulders. As he walked past the Glynn, the Cardassian spoke quietly. You are very brave or very foolish, Captain Kirk. I suspect both. That's what they tell me, Kirk replied, and stepped into the school. The USS Defiant dropped out of warp at the edge of the Badlands, and Captain Jean-Luc Picard studied the swirling plasma storms through the view screen with barely contained frustration. Beside him, Captain Sisko maintained careful composure, but the tension in his jaw betrayed his concern. Captain Sisko, Picard said, his accent crisp with disapproval. You allowed James Kirk, a temporal anomaly of incalculable historical significance, to make contact with the Maquis? He made that choice independently, Captain Picard. Sisko kept his voice level, but Picard heard the defensiveness. Kirk isn't under Starfleet authority. Technically, he's a civilian from the 23rd century. Technically, Picard repeated, the word carrying weight. He is the most decorated captain in Starfleet history who has now allied himself with terrorists. Starfleet Command is understandably concerned. The Defiant's tactical officer, a Bolian lieutenant, interrupted. Sirs, we're picking up a Federation distress signal. Victoria Colony. Captain Kirk's comm badge signature. Both captains moved to the tactical station. Picard studied the data stream, his expression growing graver. He's inside a building surrounded by Cardassian forces. Life signs indicate children present. The school, Sisko said quietly. Damn it, Kirk. What are you doing? Picard straightened, decision made. We're beaming him out, now, before this situation deteriorates further. Captain Picard, if we extract Kirk forcibly, the Cardassians will interpret it as Federation support for the Maquis. The treaty. Picard interrupted, his voice sharp. Does not require us to abandon a Starfleet captain to Cardassian custody, regardless of his temporal origin. Energize. The school's interior was exactly what Kirk expected. Children's artwork covering walls, small desks arranged in rows, a chalkboard showing half-finished math problems. And 40 terrified children huddled against the far wall while Cardassian soldiers tore through storage closets and overturned furniture. Kirk stood in the center of the room, hands clasped behind his back. projecting calm authority. A young teacher, barely 20, stood beside him, trying to keep the children quiet. Her name was Liana, and her hands shook despite her brave face. "Nothing here, Glynn," a Cardassian soldier reported. "No weapons, no Maquis equipment." The Glynn entered the classroom, surveying the chaos his soldiers had created. His eyes settled on Kirk. "You were correct, Captain. No weapons. However, Gul'Evek has ordered me to bring you in for questioning. You will come quietly. After the children are released and back with their parents," Kirk said firmly. "That was our agreement." The Glynn's expression hardened. "I made no such agreement. You assumed. A tactical error." Kirk felt anger rise but forced it down. "Glynn, you have what you wanted. Confirmation this is just a school. Let me at least help evacuate the children safely before I go with you. Surely that serves everyone's interests." The Glynn considered this, then nodded curtly. "You have 5 minutes. Then you come with us, or we start executing teachers." Kirk turned to Liana. "Get the children out. Now. Quickly but calmly." She nodded, voice shaking as she addressed the kids. "Everyone, we're going to walk outside together. Hold hands, stay quiet, everything's going to be okay." The children began moving toward the door in a trembling line. Kirk watched them go, each small face representing everything the Federation was supposed to protect. And he'd just bartered his freedom for theirs. Worth it. Always worth it. The transporter beam caught him mid-thought. Reality dissolved into sparkles of light and energy, and Kirk materialized on a transporter pad facing 2 captains he didn't know. One bald, composed, holding a cup of tea. The other dark-skinned, familiar from Deep Space Nine, looking both relieved and furious. "Captain Kirk," the bald captain said with impeccable courtesy that somehow conveyed deep disapproval. "I am Captain Jean-Luc Picard, USS Enterprise E. Welcome aboard. We've extracted you from an extraordinarily foolish situation." Kirk stepped off the pad, anger flashing. "I was negotiating the safe release of 40 children. You just violated that agreement and put them at risk. The children are being escorted from the building by their teacher," Picard replied calmly. "My chief engineer, Lieutenant Commander LaForge, transported them out simultaneously. All 43 individuals, including the teacher, are now safely aboard a runabout heading to Deep Space Nine." Kirk blinked, reprocessing. "You saved them all?" "Of course. Did you think we would abandon children?" Picard's tone softened slightly. "But your methodology, Captain Kirk, was reckless in the extreme. You cannot negotiate with Cardassians from a position of powerlessness and expect honor. I got them talking instead of shooting. That's more than your treaty has accomplished." Kirk looked at Sisko. "Captain, I had the situation under control. You had a Cardassian disruptor pointed at your head and no backup," Sisko countered. "That's not control, Kirk. That's suicide." The intercom crackled. "Bridge to Captain Picard. The Cardassians are hailing us. Gul'Evek is displeased." Picard sighed. "On screen. And someone find Captain Kirk something appropriate to wear. That uniform is a museum piece." The Defiance bridge was smaller than the Enterprise Kirk remembered, more utilitarian, designed for war rather than exploration. Fitting for this darker century. On the view screen, Gul'Evek's face appeared, his expression a mask of controlled fury. "Captain Picard, Captain Sisko, you have violated Cardassian sovereignty by extracting Federation citizens from our custody. This is a treaty violation of the highest order." Picard's voice remained perfectly measured. Gul Evek. We extracted Captain Kirk, who is not a Maquis member and holds no citizenship in your territory. The children were removed to prevent collateral damage during what we understood to be a military operation. We have not interfered with your security sweep. Kirk made contact with the Maquis. He entered Cardassian territory without authorization. He is a temporal anomaly under Starfleet protection. Picard interrupted smoothly. Not subject to Cardassian law. The Federation Council will be informed of this incident, naturally. But I believe you'll find our actions well within treaty parameters. Kirk watched Picard work, recognizing a master diplomat. This was different from Kirk's own approach. No raised voices, no passionate speeches, just calm logic and unshakable certainty. Effective, but it left Kirk cold. Evek's eyes shifted to Kirk. Picard, your temporal anomaly has been meeting with terrorists. He walked willingly into Maquis territory. That makes him an enemy of the Cardassian Union. That makes him a curious man in a complex situation. Picard replied. Nothing more. Good day, Gul Evek. The screen went dark. Picard turned to Kirk, his expression neutral but his eyes carrying disappointment. Captain Kirk, you've created a diplomatic incident. Starfleet Command has requested your immediate return to Earth for debriefing and temporal assessment. Temporal assessment. Kirk's voice was bitter. Is that what you call imprisonment in this century? It is what I call protecting you from yourself. Picard moved closer, and Kirk saw genuine concern beneath the diplomatic veneer. Captain, I have read your logs, studied your decisions. You are a brilliant tactician and a natural leader. But this is not your time. The problems we face require different solutions. Solutions like abandoning colonists? Kirk shot back. Like letting the Cardassians execute farmers while Starfleet files reports? Sisko stepped between them. Kirk, I understand your frustration. Do you? Kirk turned on him. Captain Sisko, you stood in that square and watched 12 people get executed for growing vegetables. You have a runabout that could have evacuated that colony. Ships that could defend those people. And you did nothing because a treaty said their lives don't matter. The treaty says that millions of other lives matter more. Picard said quietly. Captain, I have also faced impossible choices. I have watched innocents suffer because the alternative was worse. Command in this century requires understanding that we cannot save everyone. I never accepted that, Kirk said. I never will. Then you will die, Picard replied, not unkindly. Or worse, you will cause others to die through your certainty that there must always be a Kirk solution. The words hit harder than Kirk expected. He thought of Edith Keeler, of letting her die to save history, of David, his son, killed by Klingons, of Spock sacrificing himself in the warp core. Kirk had lost people. He'd made impossible choices, but he'd never stopped trying to save everyone. Captain Picard, the communications officer called out. Encrypted message for Captain Kirk. Source, Maquis frequency. It's Calvin Hudson. Kirk and Picard exchanged glances. Sisko nodded permission, and the message played audio only. Kirk, it's Cal Hudson. You kept your word. Those kids got home safe because you stood between them and the Cardassians. That's more than Starfleet's done in 3 years. A pause. The Maquis want to meet with you. Really meet with you, not just a cave in the dark. We have a proposal, one that might interest a captain who still believes the Federation should protect its own. The message ended. Silence filled the bridge. Kirk felt every eye on him, felt the weight of the decision pressing down. Go with Starfleet, get debriefed, potentially locked away as a temporal curiosity. Or meet with the Maquis, hear their proposal, and cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Captain Kirk, Picard said carefully, if you attend that meeting, Starfleet will have no choice but to classify you as a Maquis collaborator. You will be hunted, arrested if captured. Everything you accomplished, every commendation, every legend about James T. Kirk will be tarnished. Kirk looked at the view screen, seeing the Badlands swirling with plasma storms, chaotic, dangerous, impossible to navigate. Perfect hiding place for people the Federation wanted to forget. My legacy, Kirk said slowly, was built on doing what's right, not what's easy. On standing up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. If that gets tarnished in the 24th century, so be it. Jim. Picard used his first name deliberately. I am asking you, as one captain to another, do not do this. Let us take you back to Earth. Work within the system. File reports. Use your legend to change policy through proper channels. Kirk met Picard's eyes and saw genuine concern there. This was a good man, a good captain, but one who'd learned to compromise in ways Kirk never had. Captain Picard, how long have the Maquis been fighting? 3 years, Sisko answered. And in 3 years, how many reports have been filed? How many committee meetings? How much has changed for those colonists? Picard's silence was answer enough. Kirk turned to the communications officer. Send a message to Cal Hudson. Tell him I'll meet with the Maquis, but on neutral ground, and I come armed with questions, not commitments. Kirk, don't, Sisko started. I'm sorry, Captain, but I didn't survive this long by ignoring my conscience. Kirk's quarters on the Defiant were comfortable enough, small, functional, with a viewport showing the Badlands plasma storms and a guard posted outside who looked barely old enough to shave. Lieutenant Marks, according to his nameplate. Earnest, nervous, probably assigned to guard duty as punishment or test. Kirk sat on the bunk, analyzing his situation with a tactical assessment that had kept him alive through 100 crises. Locked door, electronic, not mechanical. Probably coded to senior officers only. Guard outside, armed, alert, but inexperienced. Ship layout, unfamiliar. But he'd observed enough during the walk from bridge to quarters to form a mental map. Time until they reached Earth. 3 days at maximum warp. 3 days to decide who he was going to be in this century. The door chime interrupted his planning. Kirk stood as Captain Picard entered, carrying 2 cups of tea. The guard closed the door behind him, leaving them alone. Earl Grey, Picard said, offering 1 cup. Hot. I find it helps with difficult conversations. Kirk accepted the tea, studying the older captain. Picard moved with the careful dignity of a man who'd spent decades in command. Every gesture measured, every word considered. Nothing like Kirk's own style of passionate improvisation. You're here to convince me to cooperate, Kirk said. I am here to talk with you as one captain to another. Picard settled into the room's single chair with the ease of someone comfortable in his own authority. May I speak frankly? I'd prefer it to diplomatic double talk. Picard smiled slightly. Very well. You terrify me, Captain Kirk. Kirk raised an eyebrow. I'm locked in a cabin without weapons. Not much of a threat. You misunderstand. I am not afraid of you physically. I am afraid of what you represent. The certainty that there is always a right answer, always a Kirk solution that saves everyone. That kind of thinking is dangerous in our time. As opposed to your time's solution of abandoning people? Kirk's voice carried edge. I've seen your Federation, Captain Picard. It negotiates with bullies and calls it peace. We negotiate because the alternative is war. Picard's voice remained calm, professorial. The Cardassian conflict killed millions. The Dominion threat looms in the Gamma Quadrant. The Borg have assimilated entire civilizations. We face existential threats on multiple fronts. The demilitarized zone, the Maquis situation, is tragic, but it is also necessary to maintain galactic stability. Kirk set down his tea untouched. When I was captain of the Enterprise, we encountered a planet called a Mini-R7. They were fighting a war with their neighbors, had been for 500 years, but they'd made it clean. Computed war. Casualties calculated by computer and people voluntarily reported to disintegration chambers. Millions dead, but no destruction, no mess. Very orderly. I know the incident, Picard said. You destroyed their war computers and forced them to face real warfare. I forced them to make peace, Kirk corrected. Because once they had to face the actual horror of what they were doing, the blood, the screaming, the reality instead of sanitized numbers, they couldn't continue. Sometimes, Captain, the civilized solution is the one that perpetuates suffering. Picard leaned forward, his expression intent. And sometimes, the passionate solution starts conflicts that consume millions. Captain, I have violated the Prime Directive. I have bent regulations. I have made choices that haunt me. But I have also learned that command means accepting limitations. You cannot save everyone. Spock told me that once, Kirk said quietly, right before he walked into a reactor chamber and saved everyone anyway. By sacrificing himself. By choosing to try. Kirk met Picard's eyes. Captain, I've been in Starfleet 30 years. I've seen things that would make your adventures look tame. And I've learned that the moment you accept you can't save people is the moment you've already lost them. Picard stood, moved to the viewport. The Badlands swirled beyond, chaotic and beautiful. The Maquis cannot win, Captain Kirk. Mathematically, strategically, it is impossible. The Cardassian Union has the numbers, the ships, the infrastructure. The Maquis have passion and righteousness and obsolete weapons. They will die slowly and painfully for a cause that cannot succeed. Maybe they know that. Kirk said, maybe they're fighting anyway because some things matter more than winning. Martyrdom serves no one. Neither does abandonment. Kirk joined him at the viewport. Captain Picard, I've read about you. The Battle of Maxia, your assimilation by the Borg, your speech at the Romulan peace talks. You're a good man and a brilliant captain. But you've become so afraid of making the wrong choice that you've forgotten making no choice is also a choice. Picard turned, and Kirk saw something crack in his diplomatic facade. Frustration, maybe anger. I have made choices, Captain. I have fired on my own people when they threatened the peace. I have watched planets burn because the Prime Directive demanded it. I have sent officers to their deaths for the greater good. Do not presume to lecture me about difficult decisions. Then why are you here? Kirk challenged. If you're so certain I'm wrong, why not just let the guards keep me locked up until Earth? Why risk this conversation? Picard was silent for a long moment. Because, he said finally, his voice carrying unexpected weight, part of me wonders if you're right. If we have compromised so much in pursuit of stability that we've lost what made the Federation worth preserving. Kirk felt the admission like a physical thing between them. This was it. The crack in the certainty the doubt that every good captain carried. "Then help me," Kirk said. "Not officially, not in any way that violates your orders. But don't stop me from meeting with the Maquis. Let me hear what they have to say. If I do that, I'm complicit in your joining a terrorist organization." "Or," Kirk countered, "you're allowing a temporal anomaly from a simpler time to offer perspective on a complex situation. Plausible deniability, Captain. I learned it from admirals who wanted things done but couldn't officially approve them." Picard almost smiled. "You're suggesting I look the other way while you escape. I'm suggesting you give me a chance to find a third option, the Kirk solution you're so worried about." Kirk's voice intensified, passion bleeding through. "Captain, what if there's a way to help those colonists without violating the treaty? What if the Maquis have information that could change the political calculus? What if you're wrong?" Picard interrupted. "What if your involvement escalates the situation? What if your legendary certainty gets people killed? Then I'll live with it, just like I've lived with every mistake I've made." Kirk's voice softened. "Captain, I know you think I'm reckless, that I shoot first and fill out reports never. But I've lost people. I've made calls that haunt me. The difference between us isn't that I don't understand consequences. It's that I've decided I'd rather fail trying than succeed through inaction." The ship shuddered slightly, natural turbulence from the Badlands. Picard looked at the door, at Kirk, at the impossible decision being offered. "If I permit this," Picard said carefully, "I cannot protect you. The moment you meet with the Maquis, Starfleet will consider you a collaborator. You'll be hunted. Everything you were, everything you accomplished, will be shadowed by this choice." "I know. And you're willing to sacrifice your legacy for people you met hours ago?" Kirk thought of Mrs. Chen's grief, of 40 children who'd been terrified, of colonists living under occupation, while Starfleet wrote reports. "My legacy isn't mine to protect, Captain. It belongs to everyone who believed in what the Federation stands for. If helping those colonists tarnishes it, then it wasn't worth protecting anyway." Picard studied him for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, he reached into his uniform and withdrew a small device, a personal transporter beacon. He set it on the table between them. "In 30 minutes, Picard said carefully, "I will return to the bridge. I will order the ship to yellow alert due to increased plasma activity in the Badlands. During yellow alert, the internal sensors will be focused on external threats. The guard outside your door will be reassigned to his battle station." Kirk stared at the beacon, understanding what was being offered. "Captain, I am not helping you, Captain Kirk. I am simply following standard yellow alert procedures." Picard moved toward the door, then paused. "That beacon will transport you to coordinates the Maquis provided, a safe house in the Badlands. What you do after that is your decision and your responsibility." "Why?" Kirk asked. "Why risk this?" Picard turned back, and Kirk saw the weight of command in his eyes, the burden of compromises made and ideals bent. Because 78 years ago, there was a captain who believed the Federation should stand for something more than political expedience. And perhaps, he paused, perhaps he still does. He left before Kirk could respond. The door closed with a solid thunk, leaving Kirk alone with the transporter beacon and the most significant decision of his displaced life. Through the viewport, the Badlands beckoned. Chaotic, dangerous, unmapped. Perfect hiding place for rebels. perfect place for a captain who'd never learned to accept defeat. Kirk picked up the beacon, feeling its weight. This was it. Cross this line, and James T. Kirk would officially become what the Federation labeled a terrorist. His name would be tarnished. His legend would be complicated. Everything would change. But 40 children were alive because he'd stood between them and weapons. Mrs. Chen had her grandson back because someone had refused to accept that their lives didn't matter. And somewhere in the Badlands, colonists were fighting because they still believed in what the Federation was supposed to see continue be. Kirk activated the beacon. The transporter took him into the storm. He materialized on a small planetoid hidden deep in the Badlands' plasma interference. Sensors couldn't penetrate this far, making it perfect Maquis territory. The base was a collection of prefab shelters and converted cargo containers, powered by portable generators and protected by camouflage netting. 30, maybe 40 people moved through the compound with military efficiency. Cal Hudson waited at the landing pad, flanked by Sakana and a mixed group of Maquis fighters. Captain Kirk, didn't think Picard would let you go. He didn't, Kirk said. He just didn't stop me. There's a difference. Hudson smiled grimly. Welcome to the Maquis, Captain. You just became the most wanted man in the DMZ. Not the first time. Kirk looked around the base, seeing the determination on every face. You said you had a proposal. We do. But first, there's someone you should meet. Hudson gestured toward the largest shelter. Someone who can explain better than I can why we're fighting and why we need you. They entered the shelter, a combination command center and living space. Tactical displays showed the DMZ, Cardassian positions, Federation patrol routes. And in the center, studying the maps with intense focus, stood a woman Kirk recognized from Starfleet records. She turned as he entered. Human, early 40s, commander's pips on her civilian clothes, eyes that held both hope and desperation. Captain Kirk, she said, her voice carrying weight of authority and exhaustion. I'm Commander Ro Laren, former Starfleet, current Maquis Tactical Coordinator. And I have a mission that requires someone who's willing to do what Starfleet won't. Kirk felt the moment crystallize. This was where the choice became real, where James T. Kirk stopped being a legend from the past and became something new, something dangerous, something necessary. I'm listening, Commander, he said. And in the back of his mind, he heard Bones McCoy's voice from decades past. Damn it, Jim. You're going to get us all killed one of these days with your I'm listening routine. Maybe. But at least they die trying. Commander Ro Laren activated a holographic display that filled the center of the shelter. Kirk watched as a star system materialized. 3 planets, an asteroid belt, and a space station orbiting the second world. This is the Brima system, Rose said, her tone clipped and professional. Population, 70,000 colonists, mostly human and Bajoran. Under the treaty, it was transferred to Cardassian control 8 months ago. Since then, the Cardassians have been systematically stripping the colony's resources and relocating anyone who protests. Kirk studied the display. Relocating where? Labor camps on Cardassia Prime. Officially voluntary resettlement, actually forced labor. Rose's jaw tightened. We've confirmed 300 colonists have been shipped off-world. Intel suggests the Cardassians are planning a mass deportation. Everyone who hasn't sworn loyalty to the Union. Sakana stepped forward, her Vulcan composure masking deep anger. Logical analysis indicates the Cardassians intend to replace the Federation colonists with their own settlers. Ethnic cleansing disguised as administrative reorganization. Kirk felt cold fury settling in his gut. And Starfleet knows about this? Starfleet suspects, Hudson corrected bitterly. They've filed inquiries. The Cardassians claim it's voluntary. The Federation Council accepts that explanation because investigating further might violate the treaty. The treaty? Kirk's voice was flat. Always the treaty. Ro manipulated the display, zooming in on the space station. This is where we come in. The station is a Cardassian administration hub, processing center for the deportations, command center for system security, and storage facility for something very interesting. The display highlighted a section of the station's lower decks. 3 weeks ago, we intercepted a coded Cardassian transmission. They're holding evidence in that station. Documented proof of treaty violations, forced relocations, even evidence of executions. Everything we'd need to prove to the Federation Council that the Cardassians aren't honoring the treaty terms. Kirk's tactical mind engaged immediately. They're keeping evidence of their own crimes? Why? Cardassians document everything, Sakana explained. It is their culture, meticulous record-keeping for internal political purposes. They never expected the Maquis to learn of its existence. And you want to steal it, Kirk said. We want to liberate it, Ro corrected with a slight smile. Give it to the Federation Council, force them to acknowledge what's happening, pressure them to renegotiate the treaty. Hudson pulled up tactical data on the station. Problem is, it's a fortress. 50 Cardassian soldiers, multiple shield generators, automated defense systems. We've run the scenarios 100 times. Any assault we mount would result in massive casualties on both sides, and we'd probably fail anyway. Kirk walked around the hologram, studying the station from all angles. His mind raced through possibilities. Transporter insertions, shield frequency modulation, diversion tactics. Classic Kirk problem solving. But you think I have a solution, he said. We think you have something better than a solution, Ro said. You have a reputation and a ship. Kirk turned sharply. I don't have a ship. I don't even belong in this century. Captain Picard's Enterprise is still in the sector, Hudson said. And you know someone aboard, someone who might be convinced to help if the cause is just enough. Kirk understood immediately. You want me to convince Enterprise crew members to help you raid a Cardassian station. We want you to convince them to help us save 70,000 lives, Ro corrected. There's a difference. Sakana added, your presence legitimizes the operation. Starfleet officers who might refuse to aid the Maquis might assist Captain James T. Kirk in a humanitarian rescue mission. Kirk laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're asking me to turn Starfleet officers into traitors. We're asking you to help them remember what Starfleet is supposed to stand for, Hudson said quietly. You said it yourself. The Federation you knew didn't abandon its own. We're giving you a chance to prove that Federation still exists somewhere. Kirk moved to the shelter's entrance, looking out at the Maquis base. He saw former Starfleet officers maintaining weapons alongside civilian colonists. Saw families living in prefab shelters because their homes had been taken. Saw the infrastructure of resistance built from desperation and determination. If I do this, Kirk said slowly, if I go back to the Enterprise and recruit crew members for this operation, I'm not just joining the Maquis. I'm actively subverting Starfleet from within. Yes, Rose said simply. People will call it treason. They already do, Hudson replied. We all made that choice. Now you have to make yours. Kirk thought of Picard's warning. about certainty, about the dangers of thinking there was always a Kirk solution. But he also thought of those 40 children, of Mrs. Chen's grief, of 70,000 colonists about to be ethnically cleansed while Starfleet wrote polite inquiries. "Show me the full operational plan," Kirk said. "Everything. Entry points, security systems, evacuation routes, backup scenarios. I won't ask people to follow me into something I haven't completely analyzed." Ro's expression shifted, respect mixed with caution. "You're planning to actually do this?" "I'm planning to consider it," Kirk corrected. "There's a difference between a bold rescue and a suicide mission. I've pulled off the first plenty of times. I try to avoid the second." For the next 4 hours, Kirk immersed himself in the tactical planning. Sakana walked him through Cardassian security protocols, their methodical approaches, their predictable patrol patterns, their reliance on technology over intuition. Hudson detailed the station's layout, highlighting weaknesses in the design. Ro showed him the intelligence on where the evidence was stored and how to extract it. And slowly, piece by piece, Kirk began to see it. Not a suicide mission, not even a particularly impossible mission, just incredibly difficult, requiring perfect timing, complete coordination, and people willing to risk everything for a cause that had been abandoned by their government. "The shield generators," Kirk said, pointing to the hologram. "They're powered by a central reactor here. Take out the reactor, the shields drop, and you can transport a team directly to the evidence storage." "Correct," Sakana confirmed. "However, the reactor is protected by automated defense systems and requires 2 authorization codes to access. Codes held by the station commander and the Cardassian regional supervisor." Kirk smiled, and it was the smile that had worried Klingons and Romulans alike. "Then we'll need to convince them to give us the codes. Cardassians do not surrender information easily," Sakana noted. "I'm not planning to ask nicely." Kirk pulled up data on the station commander, Gul Toran, a career military officer with a record of brutal efficiency. But everyone has pressure points. Everyone has something they value more than duty. Hudson exchanged glances with Ro. "You have a plan." "The beginning of one," Kirk admitted. "But I'll need help. Specific people from the Enterprise. And I'll need to convince them without revealing the full operation until they're already committed." "Manipulation," Sakana observed. "Not the most ethical approach." "No," Kirk agreed. "But I'm not going to let people volunteer for treason until they understand what they're volunteering for. I'll get them involved in a humanitarian rescue, show them the reality of the situation, and then give them the choice to go further or walk away." Ro nodded slowly. "Old school, Kirk. Get people invested, then show them why the mission matters." "It's worked before," Kirk said. Then more quietly, "And it's gotten people killed before. I need you all to understand, if we do this, if we actually raid that station, there will be casualties. Maybe ours, probably Cardassians, and the consequences will ripple across the entire sector." "The consequences are already rippling," Hudson said. 70,000 people are about to be ethnically cleansed. 300 are already in labor camps. 12 were executed in Victoria Colony yesterday. How much worse can the consequences get? Kirk looked at each of them. These fighters who'd sacrificed everything, who'd been abandoned by the institution they'd served, who were asking him to lead them in an operation that would either save lives or confirm every criticism of the Maquis as terrorists. "One condition," Kirk said finally. "We do this my way. That means minimal casualties on both sides. We go in, get the evidence, get out. We don't start a war." We don't slaughter Cardassian soldiers who are just following orders. We're Starfleet, even if Starfleet won't acknowledge us. That means we hold ourselves to a higher standard. Agreed, Rose said immediately. Hudson nodded. You're in command, Captain. We follow your lead. Sakana raised an eyebrow. An illogical restriction that increases mission difficulty by approximately 34%. However, it is acceptable. Kirk activated his communicator, the old one from his century, still functional. Then let's start with the hard part. I need to contact the Enterprise without alerting Captain Picard that I'm recruiting his crew for a Maquis operation. We have a secure channel, Rose said. Untraceable, encrypted with codes Starfleet doesn't know we've broken. Who do you need to contact? Kirk thought through the Enterprise crew he'd observed during his brief time aboard. Picard wouldn't help, too bound by regulations and treaties. Sisko had already made his position clear. But there were others. Junior officers who might still believe in ideals over politics. Engineers who'd see the technical challenge. Security personnel who remembered what Starfleet was supposed to protect. I need someone who understands the difference between orders and morality, Kirk said. Someone who's been in Starfleet long enough to love it, but not so long they've forgotten why they joined. Someone. He paused, remembering a face from the Enterprise bridge. Young, determined, with the fire of idealism not yet extinguished by bureaucracy. Someone like me, Kirk finished. 30 years ago. Rowe pulled up Enterprise crew records. We might have just the person. On the display, a personnel file appeared. Lieutenant Commander Data, Chief Operations Officer, android, fully sentient, serving under Picard with distinction. And according to his psychological profile, constantly seeking to understand human morality and ethics. Kirk studied the android's service record, commendations for bravery, multiple instances of choosing ethical behavior over direct orders, a stated goal of becoming more human. An android who wants to understand humanity, Kirk mused. And we're about to show him what humanity looks like when institutions fail and individuals have to act. Data is loyal to Captain Picard, Hudson warned. This could backfire. Maybe, Kirk admitted. The meeting happened in a cargo bay on an abandoned mining station 3 light-years from the Badlands. Neutral ground, untraceable, and far enough from both Starfleet patrols and Cardassian scanners to avoid detection. Kirk waited in the shadows as the Enterprise shuttle settled on the landing pad, its running lights cutting through the station's dim emergency power. The shuttle door opened, and Lieutenant Commander Data emerged, moving with the precise movements of his android nature. He was alone, as Kirk had requested. The android's golden eyes scanned the cargo bay with superhuman efficiency before settling on Kirk's position. Captain Kirk, Data said, his voice carrying neither judgment nor surprise. Your message indicated you required assistance with a humanitarian matter of ethical complexity. I have come. Though I must note that Captain Picard would likely disapprove of this meeting. Kirk stepped into the light. Does Captain Picard's disapproval concern you, Commander? Data tilted his head, processing the question with visible consideration. It concerns me greatly. Captain Picard is my commanding officer and friend. However, he has also taught me that ethical behavior sometimes requires independent moral reasoning. Your message suggested this situation demands such reasoning. It does, Kirk said. But before I explain what I need, I have to know. What does Starfleet mean to you, Commander Data? The android paused, a very human gesture of contemplation that Kirk found oddly reassuring. Starfleet represents humanity's highest ideals, the exploration of unknown possibilities, the protection of innocent life, the principle that all sentient beings deserve dignity and self-determination. Data met Kirk's gaze directly. It represents what I aspire to become. And what if Starfleet fails to live up to those ideals? Kirk asked quietly. What if the institution compromises the principles it's supposed to protect? Then, Data said slowly, individuals within the institution must choose whether to maintain the compromise or uphold the principles. This is the fundamental ethical dilemma Captain Picard has taught me to recognize. Kirk felt something settle in his chest, certainty that he'd chosen the right person. Commander, I'm going to show you something, and after you see it, you'll have a choice. You can return to the Enterprise and report this conversation to Captain Picard. Or you can help me save 70,000 lives that Starfleet has decided aren't worth fighting for. Data's expression, as much as an android could express, shifted to curiosity. You are affiliated with the Maquis. I'm affiliated with doing what's right, Kirk corrected. The Maquis happens to be trying to do the same thing. Show him. He called to the shadows. Rolaren emerged from the cargo bay's entrance, carrying a portable display unit. She activated it without preamble, and holographic images filled the space. Documented evidence of Cardassian atrocities in the DMZ. Forced relocations, labor camps, executions, children separated from parents, communities destroyed. Data watched in silence, his android mind processing the images with perfect recall. When the display ended, he spoke quietly. This data suggests systematic treaty violations by the Cardassian Union. Why has this not been presented to the Federation Council? Because the evidence is locked in a Cardassian station, Rose said, and Starfleet refuses to retrieve it, citing treaty restrictions on intelligence gathering in Cardassian territory. Logical, Data observed. However, the treaty also contains provisions for humanitarian intervention in cases of mass civilian casualties. This evidence suggests such intervention is warranted. Kirk moved closer. Commander, the Maquis has a plan to retrieve that evidence. But we need help. Technical expertise, tactical coordination, and someone who can operate Starfleet equipment without triggering security alerts. We need you. Data processed this for 1.3 seconds. You are asking me to participate in a covert operation against Cardassian forces. This constitutes insubordination, potentially treason. It would end my Starfleet career and possibly result in imprisonment. Yes? Kirk said simply. I won't lie to you, Commander. This crosses every line Starfleet has drawn. But those 70,000 colonists are about to cross a line too. From citizens to disappeared. And we're the only ones who can stop it. Data looked at the holographic images still frozen in the air. A Bajoran child being pulled from her mother's arms, a human man with terror in his eyes as Cardassian soldiers dragged him toward a transport ship, a colony square filled with refugees who'd lost everything. Captain Picard once told me, Data said slowly, that the measure of a person or an android is not the complexity of their programming, but the choices they make, and all choices are difficult. He said that true morality exists in the space between regulation and necessity. Your captain is a wise man, Kirk acknowledged. He also told me never to trust you, Data added. He said you have a talent for making the wrong choice seem morally imperative. Kirk almost smiled. He's not wrong. But this time, Data, the right choice and the imperative are the same thing. Data stood motionless for 7 full seconds. an eternity for an android. Then, what do you require me to do? The planning took 3 hours. Data's android mind absorbed the tactical situation with perfect precision, identifying weaknesses in the Cardassian station systems that even Sakana had missed. He calculated probability matrices, optimized transport coordinates, and designed a communications jamming algorithm that would buy them crucial minutes before the Cardassians could call for reinforcements. The reactor access codes remained problematic, Data noted, manipulating the holographic display. Without them, we cannot disable the shields. Transporter insertion becomes impossible. Kirk studied the station layout, an idea forming. Gul Torin has family on Cardassia Prime, 3 children and a wife. It's in his service record. Hudson's expression darkened. Kirk, we don't threaten families. I'm not suggesting we threaten them, Kirk said. I'm suggesting we use the idea of threat. Cardassians are paranoid. They assume everyone operates like they do. If we make Toran believe his family is in danger, that the Maquis has operatives on Cardassia itself, he will cooperate to protect them. Sakana finished, understanding. Logical. The deception exploits Cardassian psychological vulnerabilities. Data tilted his head. This constitutes manipulation through fabricated threats, ethically questionable. Yes, Kirk agreed. But compared to letting 70,000 people get ethnically cleansed, I can live with questionable. A utilitarian calculation, Data observed. Captain Picard would likely disapprove, but I find your logic compelling. Ro pulled up communications protocols. We'll need someone who can impersonate a Maquis operative on Cardassia. Someone Torin will believe could actually threaten his family. Kirk turned to Hudson. You were Starfleet intelligence before joining the Maquis. You know Cardassian psychology. Can you make him believe? Hudson smiled grimly. I've been scaring Cardassians for 3 years, Kirk. This'll be my masterpiece. The plan crystallized. Data would hack the station's sensor network, creating a false maintenance alert that would require Gul Toran to personally inspect the reactor chamber, away from guards, isolated, vulnerable. Kirk and a Maquis strike team would infiltrate during the shift change when security was transitioning. Hudson would contact Toran on a secure channel, convincing him the Maquis had operatives ready to kill his family unless he provided the authorization codes. Once they had the codes, Data would disable the shields. Ro would lead a secondary team to extract the evidence while Kirk's team held the reactor chamber. Then, everyone would beam out before Cardassian reinforcements arrived. Simple, direct. Impossible to pull off without perfect coordination and significant luck. Exactly my kind of mission, Kirk said. Data's eyebrow rose, a gesture he'd learned from Spock's service records. Captain, probability of success is 31.4%. Probability of casualties is 87.2%. Probability of mission compromise requiring improvisation is 94.6%. Sounds about right, Kirk replied. I've worked with worse odds. Captain Picard believes your reliance on improvisation is a psychological flaw that has historically endangered your crew. Kirk met Data's golden eyes steadily. Captain Picard has the luxury of flying a ship with a counselor, a ready room, and the full backing of Starfleet Command. I'm working with refugees and resistance fighters trying to save people who've been abandoned. Sometimes, Commander, improvisation isn't a flaw. It's all you've got. Data processed this for 2.1 seconds. I am beginning to understand why you are legendary and why Captain Picard finds you terrifying. These may be related phenomena. Probably, Kirk admitted. Sakana interrupted with tactical update. The Cardassian shift change occurs in 6 hours. We have limited time to position assets. Kirk stood, feeling the old pre-mission energy coursing through him. Decades since his last true command operation, but the instincts remained sharp. Then let's move. Data, you'll need to return to the Enterprise. Fabricate a reason to take a shuttle for equipment maintenance near the station. We'll coordinate insertion with your hacking sequence. Fabricate a reason, Data repeated. You are asking me to lie to Captain Picard. I'm asking you to save 70,000 lives, Kirk corrected. How you justify that to your captain afterward is between you and your conscience. Data nodded slowly. I find I am developing something that may approximate anxiety. This is novel. Welcome to Command Decisions, Commander, Kirk said. They never get easier. As Data returned to his shuttle, Ro moved beside Kirk. You trust him? An android who's only known Picard's Starfleet? I trust that he wants to understand humanity, Kirk said, watching the shuttle lift off. And we're about to show him the most human thing there is, choosing to do what's right, even when your government tells you not to. Hudson approached with tactical gear. Kirk, this is it. Once we hit that station, there's no going back. The Federation will hunt us. The Cardassians will hunt us. And we'll have officially started something that could trigger a war. Kirk accepted the phaser, checking its charge automatically. Cal, I've been starting and stopping wars since before you were born. This one's worth it. How can you be so sure? Kirk looked at the holographic display still showing those colonists, those children, those lives hanging in the balance. Because the alternative is watching good people disappear while we file reports. And I didn't spend 30 years in Starfleet to end up doing that. Sakana joined them, carrying tactical armor. Captain Kirk, probability suggests we will encounter resistance requiring lethal force. Are you prepared to kill Cardassians to achieve mission objectives? Kirk took the armor, the weight of the question settling on him. I'm prepared to do what's necessary to save those colonists, but we minimize casualties on both sides. We're not murderers, Commander. We're Starfleet officers who've been forced outside the system. That distinction matters. To whom? Sakana asked logically. To us, Kirk replied, because the moment we lose that distinction is the moment we become the terrorists they claim we are. The Maquis strike teams began assembling, 12 fighters total, including Kirk, all former Starfleet or experienced resistance operators, all volunteers, all knowing this mission might be their last. Ro conducted final equipment checks, her command presence evident in every gesture. She'd been Starfleet once, Kirk knew, had served with distinction before choosing conscience over career. Looking at her now, Kirk saw a captain who should have commanded a starship, but instead commanded refugees. 30 minutes to departure, Ro announced. Final check, weapons, communications, emergency transport beacons. Remember, we go in fast, get the evidence, get out faster. Anyone who falls behind gets left behind. No heroic rescues, no last stands. We can't save the 70,000 if we're dead. The fighters acknowledged with grim professionalism. Kirk watched them prepare, feeling the weight of command settling on his shoulders again. These weren't Enterprise crew trained in Starfleet Academy. These were colonists and deserters and true believers, held together by desperation and hope. And they were trusting him, James T. Kirk, the legend from another era, to lead them into impossible odds and bring them home. He'd done it before. With Spock and Bones and Scotty, with crew members who'd followed him through dozens of crises. But that was his century, his team, his Enterprise. This was something new, something harder, something that would define who James T. Kirk became in this darker future. "Captain," Hudson said quietly, approaching with a tactical display. "Once we hit that station, Starfleet will know you're fully committed to the Maquis. There'll be no going back, no temporal debriefing, no chance to return to your own time. You'll be stuck here, in this century, branded a terrorist." Kirk looked at the displays showing their approach vector, then up at the stars visible through the cargo bay's viewport. Somewhere out there was the Federation he'd served, the institution he'd loved, the uniform he'd worn with pride. And somewhere out there were 70,000 people who needed that Federation to remember what it stood for. "Then I guess," Kirk said slowly, "I'd better make sure they remember why my name mattered." The strike team boarded their transport, a modified Maquis raider designed for stealth insertion. Kirk took the command chair, feeling decades of muscle memory activate. Different ship, different century, same mission: save lives. Do what's right. Make the hard call. "All teams, report status," Kirk ordered, his command voice steady. One by one, the confirmations came through. Teams positioned, weapons charged, coordinates locked. Data standing by on his maintenance shuttle near the Cardassian station. Kirk activated ship-wide communications. "This is Captain Kirk. In a few minutes, we're going to do something that will change everything. We're going to prove that the Federation still stands for something beyond treaties and compromise. We're going to save 70,000 lives that our government decided weren't worth the political cost." He paused, letting that sink in. "Some of you are former Starfleet. Some are colonists. Some are just people who decided they couldn't watch anymore. But right now, on this ship, we're all the same thing. We're the people who refuse to give up, who refuse to accept that might makes right, who refuse to let good people disappear into labor camps while we do nothing." Through the viewport, Kirk could see the Badlands receding as they approached Cardassian space. "In my century, Starfleet meant something. It meant exploring the unknown, protecting the innocent, and never, never abandoning our own. Today, we're going to remind the galaxy what that means." He looked at each face. Ro, Hudson, Sakana, the fighters who'd volunteered for this impossible mission. "Let's bring those colonists home." The ship jumped to warp, carrying James T. Kirk toward the choice that would define his legend in this new century. And in the quiet of the command chair, Kirk whispered the words that had guided him through 30 years of impossible decisions. "Risk is our business." The Cardassian station hung in space like a gray fortress. All sharp angles and predatory design, weapons arrays bristling from every surface. Kirk watched it grow larger on the view screen, feeling the familiar pre-mission clarity settle over him. Time slowed. Options multiplied. The universe contracted to tactical possibilities and probability matrices. "Data, status," Kirk said into his communicator. The android's voice crackled back through their encrypted channel. "I have successfully infiltrated the station's sensor network under the guise of running diagnostic protocols. Gul Toran is currently on the command deck. The maintenance alert will activate in 3 minutes, drawing him to the reactor chamber as planned. Hudson, are you ready with the family pressure play?" "Standing by," Cal Hudson replied from the Maquis ship's communication station. "I've got forged intelligence showing Maquis operatives on Cardassia Prime, complete with surveillance images of Toran's family. It'll look real enough to scare him." Kirk nodded. "Ro, your extraction team?" "Positioned," Ro's voice confirmed. We're holding at the transport coordinates Data provided. Once those shields drop, we'll have maybe 4 minutes before their backup systems engage. 4 minutes to transport in, locate the evidence, extract it, and beam out. Kirk had pulled off tighter operations, but not many. Sakana, your sniper team? In position on the mining platform 200 kilometers spinward, the Vulcan reported with characteristic precision. If Cardassian reinforcements arrive, we will target their sensor arrays and communications, non-lethal where possible, as you specified. Kirk allowed himself a slight smile. Even in impossible circumstances, his makeshift crew was performing like Starfleet veterans. Maybe because most of them were veterans, just veterans the Federation had abandoned. The maintenance alert triggered. On Data's hacked display, Kirk watched Gul Toran receive the notification and head toward the reactor chamber with minimal security. Just 2 guards, exactly as predicted. Cardassians were nothing if not procedural. "Hudson, you're up," Kirk ordered. Hudson's voice shifted, becoming cold and menacing as he activated the communication to Toran. Kirk listened on the shared channel as Hudson delivered his performance. "Gul Toran, this is the Maquis. We know about your family on Cardassia Prime. Your wife Yalara, your children Resik, Malat, and young Delan. Such a beautiful boy, only 6 years old." On the visual feed Data provided, Kirk saw Toran stop mid-stride, his expression shifting from annoyance to alarm. "What is this?" Toran demanded. "How did you—" "We have operatives everywhere, Gul," Hudson continued, his voice carrying practiced menace. "Right now, they're watching your home, waiting for my order. You can prevent what happens next very easily. If you harm my family, I will hunt every Maquis—" "You'll do nothing," Hudson interrupted. "Because you're going to give me the reactor access codes for your station, both authorization sequences. And you're going to do it in the next 60 seconds. Or Yalara will watch her children die before we kill her too." Kirk watched Toran's face cycle through emotions. Rage, terror, calculation. The Cardassian was trained to resist interrogation, but everyone had a breaking point. And for a father, that breaking point was his children. "The Maquis doesn't threaten children," Toran said, but his voice wavered. "The Maquis you knew doesn't," Hudson replied. "But you've pushed us too far, executed too many of us, destroyed too many families. Now we return the favor. 45 seconds, Gul." Toran looked at his guards, clearly calculating whether to call for security, whether to risk his family on the possibility this was a bluff. But Cardassian paranoia worked against him. Of course, the Maquis had operatives on Cardassia. Of course, they'd target families. That's what he would do. 30 seconds. "Wait," Toran's voice cracked. "The codes are Toran 77 Melat, Authorization Alpha. And the secondary is Yalara 5 Delta Delan, Authorization Omega." His children's names, his wife's name, his access codes built from the things he loved most. A weakness disguised as sentimentality. "Data, did you get that?" Kirk whispered. "Affirmative," Data replied. "Accessing reactor control systems now. Shield generators disabling in 10 seconds. Kirk activated the ship-wide channel. "All teams, shields dropping in 10. Stand by for immediate insertion." The seconds ticked down. On the visual feed, Toran was demanding proof his family was safe. Hudson was spinning more lies, buying precious seconds. And somewhere in that station, evidence of mass atrocities waited to be liberated. "Shields down," Data announced. "You have 4 minutes before backup systems engage." "All teams, go," Kirk commanded. The transporter beam caught him mid-breath. Reality dissolved into sparkles, and Kirk materialized in the station's evidence storage room, a windowless chamber lined with Cardassian databanks and physical records. Ro's team was already moving with military efficiency, tricorders scanning, portable storage units being filled with documented proof of treaty violations. "Captain," Ro called out, working at a central terminal. "We've got deportation orders, execution records, labor camp locations, everything. This is enough to force a Federation Council investigation." "How much can you grab in 3 minutes?" Kirk asked, pulling security duty at the door. "Most of it. The really damning stuff is already downloaded." Ro's fingers flew across the Cardassian interface. "But Kirk, there's something else here. Communication logs between Gulevek and Cardassian Central Command. They're planning something bigger." "How much bigger?" 20 more colonies. Mass deportation starting next month. They're going to clear the entire DMZ of Federation citizens within a year. Kirk felt cold fury settle in his chest. Not just ethnic cleansing, systematic erasure of every human, Bajoran, and Federation colonist in the buffer zone. Turning the DMZ into Cardassian territory, in fact, not just treaty. "Get it all," Kirk ordered. "Every byte." An alarm shrieked through the station. Kirk's communicator crackled with Data's urgent voice. "Captain, the backup shields are engaging ahead of schedule. Cardassian security has detected the intrusion. You have 90 seconds before I lose transporter lock." "Ro, time to go. 30 more seconds." Ro's voice was tight with concentration. "I'm copying the last communication logs." The door exploded inward. Cardassian soldiers poured through, disruptors firing. Kirk returned fire, dropping 2 soldiers with stun settings before diving behind a databank for cover. The Maquis team responded with trained precision, suppressing fire, tactical formations, covering each other's positions. "Data, we need emergency transport now." Kirk shouted over the weapons fire. "Captain, the shields are fluctuating. If I attempt transport now, you may materialize in solid matter or not materialize at all." Kirk looked at Ro, still downloading data while phaser fire scorched the air around her. Looked at his team, 3 Maquis fighters holding the door against a dozen Cardassian soldiers. Looked at the evidence that could save 70,000 lives. The Kirk solution crystallized instantly. "Ro, how much do you have?" 80%. "Good enough. Everyone prepare for emergency transport. Data, lock onto everyone except me." "Captain Kirk, that is illogical." "Do it, Commander. That's an order." Kirk moved to the terminal, pulling a small device from his tactical vest, a modified isolinear chip that Data had programmed. He jammed it into the Cardassian computer system. "Data, I'm uploading a virus into their network. It'll crash their shields completely in 15 seconds. Transport everyone out, then come back for me." "Captain, 15 seconds may not be sufficient." "Then I'll improvise." Kirk fired his phaser at the advancing soldiers, buying precious seconds. "Transport them now." The transporter see-continue beam caught his team, including Ro's furious protest. "Kirk, you stubborn!" They vanished. Kirk was alone in the evidence room, facing a dozen Cardassian soldiers with only his phaser and the absolute certainty that this had been the right call. The evidence was safe. His team was safe. If he died here, at least he'd died doing what mattered. The virus activated. The station's shields shrieked as they collapsed, emergency lights flashing red. The Cardassian soldiers hesitated, confused by the system failure. Kirk used the moment. He fired his phaser at the ceiling conduits, causing a cascade of sparks and smoke. Then he dove through the door into the corridor, sprinting toward the nearest maintenance shaft with Cardassians in pursuit. "Data!" Kirk shouted into his communicator. "I'm heading for Junction 47. Can you lock transporters there?" "Negative, Captain. The station's power fluctuations are interfering with targeting scanners. You must reach a more stable location." Kirk slid around a corner as disruptor fire chased him. More stable location. Right. In a collapsing Cardassian station with hostile soldiers hunting him. "Define more stable." Kirk panted, climbing up a maintenance shaft. "Anywhere with less electromagnetic interference. The reactor chamber would be optimal." "The reactor chamber," Kirk repeated, still climbing. "That's 20 decks down and swarming with Cardassians looking for the person who stole their authorization codes. Nevertheless, it represents your best probability of successful extraction, 67.4%, compared to 12.1% at your current location." Kirk reached the top of the shaft and kicked open a grate, emerging onto a catwalk overlooking the station's central hub. Below him, Cardassian soldiers were organizing search parties. Above him, the reactor chamber's access conduits beckoned, a deadly climb through active power systems. "I really hate the 24th century," Kirk muttered, and started climbing. The conduits were never designed for human passage, but desperation made excellent motivation. Kirk squeezed through gaps barely wide enough for his shoulders, ignoring the heat radiating from power cables and the crackling energy that made his hair stand on end. Behind him, Cardassian soldiers entered the conduits, their shouts echoing through the metal passages. He emerged into the reactor chamber, a massive space dominated by the pulsing antimatter reactor that powered the station. Gul Toran stood beside the reactor controls, flanked by 6 guards, his expression murderous. "Captain Kirk," Toran said, his voice venomous. "The legendary cowboy, you used my family against me. You made me believe my children were in danger." Kirk drew his phaser, backing toward the reactor core. "Your children are safe, Gul. More than I can say for the 70,000 colonists you're planning to deport." "They are not colonists. They are Cardassian subjects who will be relocated as we see fit." Toran signaled his guards to surround Kirk. "And you are a terrorist who will be executed for this attack." "Data," Kirk whispered into his communicator. "Any time now would be excellent." "Stand by, Captain. The reactor is generating too much interference. You must move 3 meters to your left, away from the core." 3 meters left would put Kirk directly in the guard's firing line. Of course it would. "Kirk!" Toran shouted. "Surrender now, and I will make your death quick. Resist, and you will learn what Cardassian justice truly means." Kirk looked at the reactor, at the guards, at Toran's rage-twisted face. And he did what he'd always done when trapped. He went for broke. "Tell me something, Gul," Kirk said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Did your superiors tell you about the communication logs? The ones detailing how Cardassian Central Command is planning to deport every Federation citizen from the DMZ? How they're planning to start a war by violating every treaty provision?" Toran's expression flickered, just for a moment. But Kirk saw it. The Gul knew, maybe had known all along, and that knowledge made him complicit. "The Cardassian Union does what is necessary for survival," Toran said, "just as I do now." He raised his hand to order his guards to fire. And Kirk dove left, hitting the deck hard as disruptor bolts scorched the air where he'd been standing. The transporter beam caught him mid-roll, and reality dissolved into golden sparkles. He materialized on the Maquis Raider to cheers from the crew. Ro grabbed his arm, her expression torn between relief and fury. "You arrogant, reckless, brilliant bastard. You could have died." "But I didn't." Kirk gasped, catching his breath. Did we get the evidence? All of it, Ro confirmed, holding up the portable storage unit. Everything we need to prove the Cardassians are violating the treaty. Communication logs, deportation plans, execution records, all of it. Hudson clapped Kirk on the shoulder, grinning despite the tension. Welcome to the Maquis, Kirk. That was the most Starfleet thing I've seen in 3 years. Data's voice came through on audio, still connected from his shuttle. Captain Kirk, I must note that your improvisation resulted in a 94.7% chance of death. This confirms Captain Picard's assessment of your tactical methodology as inspired recklessness. Kirk laughed, adrenaline and relief mixing into something like joy. Tell Captain Picard I'll take that as a compliment. Captain, Sakana interrupted from tactical. Cardassian reinforcements are arriving. 3 Galore-class cruisers. We should depart immediately. Agreed. Helm, get us back to the Badlands. Maximum warp. The ship jumped to warp, leaving the Cardassian station and its furious Gull behind. Kirk collapsed into the command chair, feeling decades of combat experience settle into bone-deep exhaustion. They'd done it, against impossible odds. With a makeshift crew and outdated tactics, they'd stolen evidence that could change everything. Could force the Federation Council to acknowledge the atrocities. Could save 70,000 lives. Could restart a war. Kirk closed his eyes, hearing Picard's warning echo in his mind. Sometimes the passionate solution starts conflicts that consume millions. Captain, Rose said quietly, sitting beside him. We did the right thing. You know that, right? Kirk opened his eyes, looking at her. I know we did what was necessary. Whether it was right, history will have to judge that. History, Hudson said from the tactical station, is written by whoever survives long enough to write it. And thanks to you, Kirk, 70,000 colonists have a chance to survive. The ship reached the Badlands and dove into the plasma storms, sensors immediately losing track of any pursuit. Safe for now. But Kirk knew the real fight was just beginning. Because somewhere out there, Captain Picard would realize Data had been part of this operation. Starfleet Command would brand James T. Kirk not just a Maquis collaborator, but an active terrorist. And the Cardassians would be planning retaliation. Kirk had crossed the line. There was no going back. Ro, he said finally, get that evidence to every news service, every Federation counselor, every independent journalist you can find. Make it impossible to ignore. Force them to acknowledge what's happening. Already being transmitted, Ro confirmed. By tomorrow, everyone in Federation space will know about the deportation plans and the labor camps. And then, Hudson added grimly, all hell breaks loose. Kirk nodded. Then we'd better be ready for it. He stood, moving to the view screen where the Badlands swirled with chaotic beauty. Somewhere beyond those plasma storms was the Federation he'd served, the Starfleet he'd loved, the century he'd been torn from. The evidence James T. Kirk and the Maquis liberated from that Cardassian station spread through Federation space like wildfire. News services broadcast the deportation plans. The Federation Council convened emergency sessions. Protests erupted on 100 worlds as citizens demanded accountability. But institutional change moved slowly. Committees formed, investigations launched, diplomatic protests filed. The machinery of bureaucracy ground forward while in the DMZ, Cardassian soldiers continued their work, now more cautious but no less determined. Kirk remained in the Badlands, a ghost from another century who'd become the Maquis' most valuable asset. not just for his tactical brilliance, but for what his name represented. James T. Kirk, the legend who never gave up, who always found a way, who'd chosen principle over institution. His presence legitimized the resistance, gave hope to colonists, and reminded former Starfleet officers why they'd worn the uniform in the first place. Lieutenant Commander Data faced court-martial aboard the Enterprise. Captain Picard, torn between duty and respect, delivered testimony that was damning in its honesty and sympathetic in its understanding. Data was found guilty of insubordination and stripped of his position as operations officer. But Picard, exercising his authority, suspended the sentence pending appeal, a technicality that kept Data aboard the Enterprise while acknowledging his choice had been ethically complex. In his testimony, Data stated simply, "I concluded that Captain Kirk represented Starfleet's ideals more faithfully than Starfleet's current policies. If this makes me guilty, then I accept that guilt." The Cardassian Union demanded Kirk's extradition, calling him a terrorist who'd attacked their sovereign territory. The Federation refused, not out of support for the Maquis, but because acknowledging Kirk's century displacement made him legally undefined. A man from 2270 couldn't be prosecuted under 2370 law. The legal argument was thin, but it held. And in the shadows of Deep Space Nine, Captain Sisko filed reports that were thorough, comprehensive, and somehow always placed the Maquis one step ahead of Starfleet pursuit. Not enough to be obvious, just enough to matter. The 70,000 colonists in the Brima system received a reprieve, not full Federation protection, but international observers, media attention, and sufficient scrutiny that mass deportation became politically impossible. They remained under Cardassian rule, but they remained alive, aware that somewhere in the Badlands, a captain from another era had fought for them when their own government wouldn't. Kirk adapted to his new role with the pragmatism of someone who'd always valued mission over protocol. He trained Maquis fighters in Starfleet tactics. He planned operations that minimized casualties while maximizing impact. He became the bridge between the Maquis' desperate passion and Starfleet's disciplined methodology. Exactly what both sides needed, even if neither could acknowledge it. But late at night, in his quarters on whatever base or ship served as temporary headquarters, Kirk sometimes stared at the stars and wondered about the line between principle and fanaticism, between fighting injustice and becoming the chaos you feared. He'd made his choice, crossed his line, but the consequences rippled outward in ways he couldn't control. The Maquis grew bolder, inspired by Kirk's presence. Some operations succeeded brilliantly, others failed catastrophically. And with each action, the line between resistance and terrorism blurred further, until even Kirk sometimes struggled to recognize which side he was on. Captain Picard, watching from the Enterprise, saw his fears about Kirk materializing, the passionate certainty creating consequences that transcended simple right and wrong. But he also saw colonists saved, atrocities exposed, and a Federation forced to examine its compromises. In the end, James T. Kirk had become exactly what the 24th century needed and feared most. A reminder that institutions exist to serve principles, not the other way around. That sometimes, doing what's right meant becoming what others called wrong. That the line between hero and terrorist was often drawn by those with the power to enforce their definition. The Maquis Rebellion would continue for years, growing more desperate as both the Federation and Cardassians cracked down. Kirk would remain its heart, not its leader, but its conscience. The voice reminding fighters that means mattered even in impossible circumstances. And somewhere in Starfleet archives, a report was filed and sealed. Subject: Captain James T. Kirk, Temporal anomaly. Status: active threat to Federation security. Recommendation: apprehension when feasible. Notation: handle with extreme caution. This individual represents everything Starfleet once stood for. The notation was unsigned, but those who read it knew it came from someone who understood what Kirk had become. Not a terrorist, not a hero, but something far more dangerous. A man who still believed the Federation could be what it promised to be, and in believing, made it impossible for others to forget.